Welcome, everybody. It is May 9th, 2023, and you are watching HOSTility on the Line, where we take calls from people on the topic of the day. And the topic of the day today is more of a character of the day, a person of the day, and a person who, it's been a while since we've done something together, and I've actually been looking forward to this a lot, and then we had to delay it because of a hack. Everybody, please welcome Seth Andrews. This is where I imagine people are clapping at home.
Those people would commit a tenth of their energies to producing something good, right? Yeah. Think about all the destructive people in the world. And if they would just commit themselves to bettering the world in some small ways, imagine the utopia, not utopia, but imagine the type of better world we might live in. I think about this a lot, about the agents of chaos out there. But I'm glad you're back, and I'm glad you're still kicking, brother. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I hear what you just said, and what I hear is I could do 10% of the amount of work I'm doing now and just become a hacker and make my money that way. And I don't know. Boy, the appeal. I appreciate that. It's been a wild couple weeks. There's still things in the mix and still stuff we're working on, but we're mostly, I would say, restored, and people know where to find us. Still recovering from the mighty algorithm, the thing closest to a god that I have in my life. But that's not the topic of tonight. The topic of tonight is you and your new audiobook. Is it available in text form as well? I couldn't find it when I was looking for it last night.
Well, I mean, I'm self-conscious now. I didn't realize I was the subject of the show. I'm not sure I warrant a whole show, but if you want to know what I'm doing, I'll certainly tell you that.
Sure.
The book that I released last year is called Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. It's based on a speech that I gave in Canada in 2017 that I thought it was kind of a throwaway. It was an entertaining speech, but I didn't think it would connect with people the way that it did. And it addressed a lot of the normalized things that people do in the faith that, when you look at it from an objective perspective, are just weird and crazy and kind of culty and sometimes just stupid. Yeah. The audience ate it up. And so I decided, well, if it really resonates that much with people, let's take a deeper dive. So Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. The book came out text form, digital form, and yes, audiobook form last year. And then in August of last year, I launched a second podcast. Not because I don't love my work with the Thinking Atheist, because I really do. But I mean, after 13 years, right?
Yeah.
After how many times can you debunk the Adam and Eve story? How many times can you address Noah's Ark? How many times can you go after the Jesus story and the contradictions in the Gospels and the insanity of the Book of Revelation and the apologist acrobatics? And while I do enjoy doing that, I mean, it wears you down. After a while, you're just like, religion's not bringing anything new to the table. In fact, that's one of the reasons why recently on my show, especially, instead of just doing counter-apologetics, we're doing, deep dives into psychology and the brain and how beliefs work and all this new technology that targets how we think, neurotechnology, the stuff that Meta is working on, and all of these other subjects that are related. I just released a show that talked about Tucker Carlson and the worst he's done, some of the worst he's done over the last 20 years. So even there, I'm spreading out a little bit. But True Stories with Seth Andrews is, it emulates the classic Paul Harvey Rest of the Story broadcasts that were big on AM radio in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, where I tell a 5-minute story, a true story that can be anything. It can be true crime or weird news, celebrity trivia, ancient history, something that happened in the headlines last month. And then usually at the end, there's a kicker, there's a twist, potentially a surprise at the end where you go, oh, that's crazy. I had no idea. So it's really participatory. You get to listen to the true story, but at the end, you're like, whoa, I'm now really engaged. And so that's been awesome. And you can find that pretty much on all major podcast apps. True Stories with Seth Andrews comes out 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And they are 5 minutes, so they can be digested without chewing into too much of the rest of your podcast playlist.
Sure. Now, I should have just said the name from the onset because I think I set you up for the wrong path or direction. The one I was referring to is Ghost Stories with Seth Andrews.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And that was
Ghost
the one that
Stories.
is,
Oh yeah, that's actually, it predates Fox News Christian. And the reason Ghost Stories exists as an audiobook is because I love Halloween and I love good horror movies. And so like 10 years ago on the podcast in October, I produced a whole show of ghost stories. Just, some of it's folklore and legend that's related to a specific place. I mean, it can be anything from a haunted forest to the murder house of City X to the Stanley Hotel to whatever.
Sure.
People loved it. And they started saying, are you going to do it again next year? I had a few people at first who were like, why would an atheist want to tell ghost stories? I mean, these killjoys, these pedantic killjoys, right? I'm like, why would an atheist enjoy Lord of the Rings, right? Why would an atheist go to the Star Wars films? Why would an atheist read any of these fantasy or fiction books or whatever? I mean, come on, this is the playground of the imagination. And so after doing years and years of the broadcast, including an original story that I would write to cap every show, I decided, well, let's do an entire audiobook about it.
Yeah.
So, we have, I think, 14 chapters of audio produced by me with several voiced actors who assisted me that I brought in to help flesh things out. And, I mix in some of the headlines with folklore. Some of these stories are totally original. And sometimes I'll even go in and throw in the debunk, right? Because we're all winking at the material. I mean, if you talk about Amityville, right? The Amityville horror, and they're making a new film or they're touring the house, and anyone who's actually done even a cursory examination of the Amityville legend knows that, yes, there was a murder, there were a series of murders in the house, but the entire story that came after is marketing, right?
Yeah.
It's fabricated.
Yeah.
And so occasionally I'll wink and say, we all know this is a bunch of crap, but here's the story. So that's what Ghost Stories is. And I've gotten good response from it. I'm delighted about it. So
Yeah. So wide array of things here. My apologies for the misdirect at the beginning. I should have just said the name. And then there's true stories and ghost stories. There's a pattern that's starting to evolve here. That's what they say. Two makes a pattern, right? But there's certainly a pattern here. So as we invite people, we're going to keep discussing things for the next few minutes. We do have some calls lining up. As we're putting out there, obviously, this is a call-in show. Every show on the line is your invitation. If you want to share a ghost story, knowing that you're going to be speaking to two skeptics, otherwise the normal route of calls, if you are a theist who wants to call in with some challenges, we love those. And anything else that would be on theme or on topic, such as deconstructing not just from religion, but from being, as Seth calls it, a Fox News Christian, which was, I was a Fox News Mormon and a Glenn Beck Mormon, more specifically. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I liked Glenn Beck when he was just a radio host because he was really good at it. And then he got that gig on Headline News and he started to go more political.
Yeah.
And the more political he got, the more alarmed the rest of us became. And now he's just totally off the rails.
Yes.
It's interesting. And it's also interesting doing a show about ghost stories in the month of May instead of October. I find it, I'm good with it any day of the week because this is my wheelhouse. I just love this stuff. But I know that many people who don't believe in gods all do hold a belief or a potential belief. They haven't discounted the idea of spirits or ghosts. They've had an encounter. They walked into the room and got the goosebumps. There's some unexplained phenomenon. So they're like, okay, I don't believe in Yahweh, Allah, Thor, Krishna, whoever, or even a deistic God. But what if after we die, the energy of our minds, bodies, etc., actually, goes off to incorporate in some way into a spiritual membrane that has not yet been measured? I mean, and I understand the attraction of that. And, if it's
immortality
turned out to be true, was it Christopher Hitchens, near the ending of his life, said, I rather like surprises. And I kind of feel the same. You know, if something is out there, okay, great.
Yeah.
I kind of put ghosts into the same category as other religious experiences, right? You get into the burden of proof. And then when you see the debunkers, right? Everything from the orbs to the, to the things that go bump in the night, to the people who were just making this shit up.
Yeah.
And selling books and TV shows, et cetera. I mean, it's hard to remain a believer, I think, once you've really involved yourself in the culture of the debunkers. I don't know if you've got any experience with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, so two things I would say. One, to the beginning of your statement, I'd like to a slight defense of doing this in May. The one advantage of doing it in May is, as people call in, knowing they're calling skeptics, we don't just seem like we're trying to ruin Halloween for everybody.
That's totally legit.
Yeah. You do it around Halloween, you just look like you're there to shit in the punch bowl.
Like an asshole, yeah.
Yeah, I categorize a lot of the ghost stuff with there's a I don't know if the word disturbing is too strong. It is for ghosts, but it isn't for other stuff. There's a disturbing trend of people leaving religion. I think you kind of mentioned this, where they don't let go of everything, or they look for an alternative. And so years ago, I was very optimistic and excited to see, like, ooh, look at the way we're seeing the trends of non-believers. Clearly, this is going to turn out to be a curve, not a line of increase. It's going to be exponential year over year. And that's turned out to be true. However, the non-believers in a God has not turned out to be the non-religious or the non-faith-based, because now there are surgings. Not to say that there isn't an increase in skepticism too, but now amongst atheists, there's a disturbing trend in either pretending to be pagan or some type of paganism, ritualistic paganism without the gods, or tarot. Astrology is the one that probably annoys me the most. And believing in ghosts seems to actually be categorically the least problematic of the bunch, because for the most part, people who are just believing in ghosts are either trying to give a silly explanation to what amounts to plumbing pipes expanding in their walls, or they want to feel that level of comfort of, the one thing you can't find outside of religion, if you're an atheist, is without some sort of religious belief, is that denial comfort that comes from believing that death isn't the end. And we do it for ourselves, and we do it in for the feeling of, I'm going to see this family member again someday. And even just to feel somewhat connected to that family member. I know people will speak to somebody who has died, whether it's to a gravestone or it's an ongoing thing. And so it's one of those harder ones, because it's like, believing in ghosts, I can sympathize with more than most of the other spiritual beliefs that people still hold on to after they leave religion. But it's still non-skeptical. It's still basically saying, like, there are conditions under which I say it is okay to suspend critical thinking. And the moment that you do that, how do you tell somebody else they can't for a different category? And that's where it all. That's why I like having these conversations.
Are these ghost hunter shows, right? They take 3 of the dumbest people on the planet.
Yeah.
Just room temperature IQ types, and they give them gear, right? Yeah. They've got the thermal measuring, and they've got the EMP or EV or whatever it is. Electromagnetic or electro something pulse. I'm trying to remember. Forgive me. I'm doing it off the cuff.
I know they track electromagnetic fields with one. Yeah. And then there are special audio recorders, and because luckily ghosts that work in this ethereal supernatural realm, you can still pick them up with a cassette recorder. That's good.
And they just walk around just as dumb as a sack of hammers. Just, well, hey, wait, the temperature's cold in here. Somebody go get the camera, get the infrared. Woo, that's proof. The orb thing I've never understood. I mean, I understand it from the perspective of people wanting to believe, but all you have to do is understand how lenses work and how dust works.
Yeah.
And that's debunked. But there's kind of a romance to the idea of an otherworldly plane that I buy. I mean, I get why people, and this idea that we continue on in some meaningful way, I mean, I find that relatively harmless. I mean, that's a complicated conversation. There's a great documentary about the late film critic Roger Ebert. It's called My Life, I believe. And I think the way he was speaking and the way he had written, I think he was an atheist.
Yeah.
Because when he was looking at his imminent death, there was no talk about heaven or I'll see anybody later, even between him and his wife. But they had a saying. And whoever went first, they said to the other, when you go, look for me. I will see you at the Strawberries, which apparently was a place that they fondly remembered together. So in their version, I think a very consciously sort of manufactured version, a romantic version of where they might one day meet again. That place included Strawberries. And honey, when you go and I've gone before you, I'll see you at the Strawberries. That kind of thing really kind of fills your heart up a little bit. But when we get into trouble, I think, is when we start to allow these types of, the accepting of totally unsubstantiated claims to bleed over.
Yeah.
And pass the burden of proof. And then you've got people who are really involved in magical thinking who are then applying rational thinking to other parts of their lives. It's messy, brother. I mean, I don't know. Do I freak out at people who believe in ghosts? No. Do I think there's anything to it? No. Do I think we would be better if we all were winking at it and said, all right, we know it's a bunch of crap, but hey, let's go on the ghost tour anyway? I kind of think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of priorities. If we stripped away, we succeed and nobody is Muslim anymore, nobody's Catholic anymore, nobody's Mormon anymore, and we get rid of all of the fundamentalist forms of religion, then we get rid of all the moderate forms of religion, then once we're left with like the uber progressive forms, like uber progressive Christianity, I mean, I'm not going to stop challenging people's non-skeptical beliefs. And that's when you would see sort of an equal prioritization. Like this person who thinks that Jesus was a hippie just telling us all to love each other and become socialists and he was resurrected is about at the same point on par with me as like ghost stories would be at that point. And it's still going to be... Yeah. Now I'm willing to go like, we still need to, if we don't keep working on the skepticism thing, this can slide all back. But yeah, it's not usually high priority in a one-on-one.
I think that's an important, it's like a kind of triage. I mean, if I see a deist who says, I think there's something out there that designed everything, I'm not nearly as interested in that person as I am the Christian nationalist waging war on democracy and decency in this culture, right? Those are my target. I want to go after the fundies. And, these other folks here, they're well down on let's address those questions later. They're not the ones proactively going after everybody from trans people and LGBT people and non-Christians and the Constitution, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a priority game.
Yeah, I hear that, but I will say if somebody calls in with a when the non-Christian nationalists call in, I still fervently engage that because
if they come to you, I think that's totally that's a different scenario, brother. I didn't hate to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure I'd qualified that for you. Yeah. They contact you and they're talking deism or whatever. I get that. Yeah.
And my position is there are no harmless faith-based positions. So you use the phrase relatively harmless, and I thought that was perfect because it's like relative to the amount of harm, it seems harmless. But at the end of the day, the person who is a progressive Christian that still has a faith-based thing next to the fundamentalist who is, a Nazi or all but, they're different, obviously. And by my, secular humanist worldview, one's causing a lot more harm than the other. But the concept of truth has nothing to do with harm. And so in that scenario, there's still that level of, I still want to have the conversation with you because at some point with the Nazi, he can still say, well, this is what I believe and it's on faith and it's because it's what makes me feel good. And you want to also use that same excuse, but that's not why I'm letting it go with you. I'm letting it go with you because there's no harm. There's not as much harm or there is very little harm. But if foundationally you two actually want to defend why you believe on the same foundation, we can't then say, I only scrutinize him because he's harmful, because harm and truth have nothing to do with each other. Lots of true things are harmful. And so that's
I'm interested too in how people make gods in their own image, or they you don't use white out anymore, but you cross out the specific parts of the dogma that bother you, that you hang on to the rest. There's a popular online pastor, his name is John Pavlovitz, and we disagree on theology, but we agree on humanity. But what I find interesting when I watch him is he's always posting these posters and quotes and memes. I think he's written an entire book about how Jesus and the Bible never condemns gay people. Jesus loved everybody. And of course, I'm over here like, wait, have you read the Old and the New Testament? Because God took a really hard line with non-heterosexuals. So I'm looking at John going, you're a smart guy, right? You're an educated guy. How do you get there? How do you make that statement? And beyond the fact that I'm an atheist having to educate a believer about what their own Bible says, which I find amazing and ironic, I am also struck by this person's moral center has caused them to refashion and refabricate and even rebrand what Christianity is, what it means, what its deity says and does and wants, to better fit a innate moral code. And I find that fascinating. And there are churches all around the world. They've got the Bible, but, we don't, God loves everybody. I don't believe in hell, right? The Rob Bell thing. My God would never create a burning fire pit filled with torture and pain. And no. Let's just cross that one out. People are literally making a new religion in their own image, but calling it Christianity, etc.
Yeah, one of my favorite people is a very progressive Christian who sort of operates in this realm of like, the Bible is you have to figure out what in the Bible is still from God because men ruined it. Basically, it's like she has no problem with the concept of like, all of this stuff that sounds like a bunch of men trying to preserve their own, for lack of a better phrase, wiener, trying to preserve the quality of their sex and organ and all, that clearly is there. But between that, you can see the stuff God did want, and then it's about and it's just one of those things where it's like, well,
and God's
what do you do?
Here. God, like, if I had a critical message with eternity in the balance, this message for my children, and I know that someone had screwed it up and billions were using a wrong version of the message. As a caring parent, I should immediately intervene to make sure that is corrected. The record is corrected. So the apologetic that, man screwed it up. And that's why we have squillions of different versions of Christianity. And that's why nobody can even argue over which translation of the Bible's correct. That's why some people are total literalists and some people say it's metaphor and allegory and some's for yesterday and some's for today. And this is a mistranslation. I mean, you would think a benevolent parent would come down and say, all right, somebody screwed this up. Let me correct the record with clarity so there is no question. And that simply never happens.
Yeah. All right. We have tons of, we have so many calls lining up, but I could just keep doing this. If I don't stop myself, we'll just
Jimmy
talk
and I
for
were
the whole
sitting over
time.
coffee, like a weekend would pass like that.
I think so.
Just say.
I think so. We'll just go in order here. We'll start with Dylan in Florida. Dylan, my condolences that you live in Florida. Dylan, you're on the line.
Hello. So I have both a semi-ghost story, but also a general question. If you want me to prefer which other way to go, just let me know.
Whatever your heart tells you, Dylan.
I guess I could tell you the most recent quote-unquote ghost story that I've had, which if you kind of want to add some gravitas to it, but in the most blunt form, it had most recently happened during the hurricane that was here in Florida, the really, really big one that just passed a couple months ago.
Okay.
And I was at my mom's. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just saying okay.
Oh, yeah. But I was at my mom's and the power had just went out. And So my mother has two little entryways right where the front door will be. And when I passed my phone light over it, it almost looked like there was a guy in a black morph suit walking on all fours. And I went, that's weird. That's probably my cat. And I turned around to the chimney, and no, he was still staring up at the chimney, listening to the wind whistling outside. And I went, that's weird. But I kind of sort of ignored it because I'm pretty sure it was a trick of the light, as usual. But I thought it was weird, and I enjoy it. But I'm pretty sure I could probably say it in a more gravitas way. But which kind of goes to my question, which is, I had the call screener kind of wrote moral, because that was the only, I didn't really have a synonym that had the same weight as it. But I don't really think it's not really good or right kind of question. Is it okay to say ghost stories that kind of scare people, even if you yourself don't believe in ghosts? Because one of my earliest childhood memories was scaring the shit out of my neighbor, when I was a kid, scaring the shit out of another neighbor kid by telling him about the previous owner, how the mother had passed away in our house. And I had just basically built it up and spooked the shit out of him by looking behind him and go, oh my God, she's here. And he screamed and cried all the way home. And I was like, okay, that was fun. So that kind of, I guess, built the want to scare people, I guess. But sort of wanted to know if that's kind of good to do, even if you yourself don't believe in ghosts. That's kind of why I wanted to call tonight, because I know Seth's a non-believer, but he also has a whole book about ghost stories. If that makes sense. Sorry.
Seth, after you.
Well, I don't think you beat yourself up over a prank. I mean, we've all done something, Bigfoot was just recently. See, when I was a kid, that was the big thing. They saw Bigfoot out there, and we'd gone into the yard, and we'd actually made footprints in the yard. And we took a friend out back, and they were like, "Oh my God, it's Bigfoot!" I think that's pretty harmless. I don't know that I would make a habit out of perpetually terrifying the people you care about. I also worry that you would become the person who cried wolf if at some point you actually had to tell a genuinely true scary story and your reputation for lying preceded you. But if we are fully aware that this is a playground of the imagination, I see it like a roller coaster. I think you can be afraid. Like when I go to a scary movie and I sit there, and it's harder and harder to find a really good scary one when you've seen decades and decades of them. But let's say something's genuinely scary and I'm curled up in a ball and I'm holding my breath as the character turns the corner and I can't see what's in the dark and my imagination's going crazy and everybody jumps and screams, blah, blah, blah. At the end of that 2 hours, everybody's laughing and high-fiving and, oh my God, that was just insane. I was so scared. It's like a roller coaster, and you know that you are safe. You know it's a playground. And given that context, everything becomes safe. You're really safe, and you know it. You know it's fantasy as well. I think that's amazing. And if, this kind of thing, scary stories don't ring your bell, that's valid. Do what works for you. But if you're also one of those people who enjoys a good scare, I think without becoming a terror to those you care about, I think the occasional story, I don't see the harm. And I think knowing that it's bunk, but still allowing yourself to suspend belief to enjoy our naturally evolved imaginations, I mean, that's just part of being alive. And I think it can be a wonderful thing.
It's interesting because I think I would say one of the same things you said, which I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about anything you did in the past, but I'm also the person who has said there's no benefit to lying about Santa and you can still play Santa as a game. And that's sort of like Seth is bringing up when you go to a horror movie, you are consenting to a certain mind space of anxiety and of stress and of whatever else it's going to cause. And even consenting, though you might regret it later, to the nightmares that it might invoke, or as you're driving home from watching, for me, when I was a kid, I watched I Am Legend. And when I was driving home, I was just like expecting to see vampire people just running around in the silhouettes and stuff. So to me, the question about morality or ethics or whatever has to do with honesty and not the actual whether or not ghost stories themselves are moral or immoral, but the honesty behind and whether or not you are doing something with a person's consent. And so if you just get a jolly out of scaring the fuck out of people, whether they wanted you to or not, and you're playing on their what's the word, gullibility, that I would say is sort of douchey.
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
Or even if they're not gullible, but if they're just vulnerable.
Vulnerable, yeah. That I would call douchey. But as far as, there's no, obviously horror movies prove you can be afraid even though you've consented to hearing a scary story. The consenting to it doesn't take the fear away.
This is another observation
that,
if I may, very quickly, Dylan, I just want to say this, and then the floor is yours. I can't think of one person in my life who has been a constant prankster that everybody liked, like they wanted to be around.
Yeah.
Like the constant, I'm sure those people exist. There may be people that's just how they, people like to play pranks on each other all the time. But the practical joker, the one who sets someone else to take the fall for the big laugh, I can't think of someone who is really that well liked and certainly not well trusted for obvious reasons. I think there's probably a different way to have that kind of enjoyment.
Yeah.
I usually typically preface my stories by, I don't actually really believe in ghosts. It's typically how I preference those stories. And I usually have them in the context of, oh, we're going to tell each other some spooky stories. All right, I'll tell one of mine. Usually my more rude pranks, I would say, was when I was younger and definitely not a popular kid, because I'm like, if no one likes me, I want to make sure everyone doesn't like me. Because I've definitely had another prank where I pretended to be possessed during a school trip. So that was fun.
Yeah, at some point, unless you did something heinous, you learn to not hold what you did in high school against yourself, because we're all a bunch of fucking sociopaths.
Middle school.
Whatever, or middle school or before, or high school, middle school, all that.
Yeah, I was definitely not a well-liked kid, so it was more of a, well, I'm just going to scare people away anyway. But that's psychology stuff.
Yeah, Dylan, the pedantic part of me wanted to point out at the beginning of your story that this wasn't a ghost story. This was a attribution of failure in the peripheral vision story, or just a peripheral vision story. And if you want to leave the possibility of a ghost in I don't remember what you said, a furry suit or something.
No, it was the black morph suits, the ones where people will dress it. It's like skin tight almost, like Spider-Man. That's how it looks.
Got it. So, a ghost who specifically dresses in a specific type of clothing that no one knew about because it's a rather recent invention and is in some way a part of your, forgive me, Dylan, but internet search history. That's the specific ghost that might have shown up for you. I don't know, Dylan.
Oh, I kind of want to out pedantic you on what ghost story is actually true, but that's me trying to out pedantic you.
No, but it wouldn't even necessarily be about truth. It's just it's if somebody was like, okay, I have a ghost story, and they're talking about things that truly do seem supernatural, but I would want to still investigate. That's I saw something in the peripheral vision, and it was a person in black latex head to toe or whatever. That's sort of different to me than somebody who's saying, and we were all sitting around a Ouija board, and then the board itself started to float, and the apparition of my grandmother appeared and told me to stop masturbating. That's more a ghost story to me. I don't know. But all the ghosts I've ever met told me to stop masturbating. Maybe that's why. Anything else before we let you go, Dylan, before we move to the next one?
I don't think so. I think it's just, for me, ghost story can entail just a spooky occurrence that's happened to you or somebody you know or somebody you know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's where the definition changes for me, I suppose. But thank you for letting me call in. I'll get back to modding, though.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan.
And thank you, Seth.
No, thank you. I find it interesting getting into the ghost story and what scares people.
Yeah.
Without ruining the party, has become a fascinating exercise into how the brain works, whether it's pattern seeking, right? Whether it's meaning seeking, how memories are formed for those people who remember a supernatural occurrence. But we're not talking about an exact record. We're talking about how memories often don't take hold immediately, and then they're altered, and then they alter again over time, and how our biases and influences all affect that. And I mean, it's just fascinating stuff to see this rich tapestry of perception and reality and how they don't always jive together. And again, I don't think that ruins the idea of telling a scary ghost story, but I do think, understanding how we can be fooled might help serve as a preventative against somebody with a divining rod, or, coming in with a recording of white noise and the scary voice embedded within. Understanding our pattern-seeking brains, I think, can help protect us. It's kind of a bullshit detection kit. So I find that interesting.
Yeah. I am going to continue my pedantry, as somebody in the live chat had said, Jimmy being a psychopath, claiming we all are, is the epitome of projecting. First of all, I said sociopath. And that part is important. There's a difference between sociopaths and psychopaths. But what I specifically said is that you let go of your teenage years because we were all sociopaths, which is a reference to recent studies that actually do reveal that your brain chemistry prior to a certain amount of development that comes in your later teenage years begins then, and then it sort of solidifies in your early 20s. You actually are, brain chemistry wise, very close to, if not just being a sociopath until you develop that. There's emerging studies right now showing that the brain chemistry of teenagers compared to sociopaths aren't much different. And I think we all remember that. The level of selfishness, the level of what happens to me, these things that now we see seem very silly and very arbitrary, that felt like the absolute biggest things in the world. The ability to only empathize with that which was directly in front of you, whereas as you get older, your empathy faculties are supposed to expand, or you join the Republican Party. Those are the options. But anyway, we were having a competition in pedantry, and I decided I was going to win first place. We'll move on. We're talking to Kevin in Oregon. Kevin, you are on the line.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
So basically, this is about if you typed haunted Oregon City pot shop into Google, you'd see what I'm talking about. But basically, the gist of it is, I used to work next door to... Can I say the P word, by the way? I don't want to get you guys
pot?
in trouble on
You already
YouTube.
said pot.
Ah, crap.
Yeah, and you can't actually. No, of course. Go on. We don't... you're fine.
Well, I didn't know, because I thought I watch other videos and they try to avoid it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it was,
so it's called 50 Tree. It's in downtown Oregon City here in Oregon. I used to work next door. My buddy owns a restaurant next door. Anyways, there is a news, like a 2-minute news story, and video surveillance is required to run 24/7 at all marijuana shops, and it's legally, you cannot alter the video in the state of Oregon. And you can literally see a jar of weed moving by itself. And then there's another thing where there's this one's not as dramatic to me, but it's like a pair of scissors that's sitting in with some pens, and it kind of jostles around by itself. And then when I went in there, I asked them, they said, "Oh yeah, that's Charlie." And they show me this picture of this guy from the early 1900s that used to own that building, and it was a pharmacy. And I guess it burned to the ground at one point or something. They said he doesn't like the blueberry gummies. Every morning they come in and the blueberry gummies are knocked off the shelf. They said that, and this is now anecdotal, I know, but they said the ringer thing on the door will ring by itself and nobody will be there. But the main thing I kind of wanted you guys to get your opinion on is this jar of weed that you can literally see moving by itself on a flat counter.
I'm watching the video right now.
Okay, great. I didn't know if you guys were going to watch it on air or not. So
no, you're good. And I just watched the scissors move too. And ironically, both items move exactly the way you see things in caught on camera ghosts move that are then later debunked to have been people using some method to move them. Both of them exactly the same. These ghosts are lazy. Did you say that they make the claim that every morning the blueberry stuff is knocked over?
No, they didn't. I don't know that they said every morning,
okay.
but they said a lot of the times they'll come in and they have to make sure everything's right before they leave for the night, and then they come back and for some reason the blueberry gummies are. And they showed me the shelf. It's a level shelf in a fridge, in a closed fridge, and they said it gets knocked off. But that's what they said.
Right.
The main thing was the video.
Every time, it happens every time there isn't somebody here using objective means to inspect it. It's the weirdest thing. Seth, what are your thoughts? I just to tell you the video, it's not impressive.
I am most struck by the words that I've heard you use maybe 10 times. They said.
Yeah.
They said. They said. They said. And, that might be the starting point of a larger, longer conversation about things like peer review, laboratory conditions, replicable results, etc., coming up with a measurable explanation beyond someone who said the blueberries got fucked up. And, I think that's probably where the skeptic starts this conversation. Curiosity is amazing, but I just think until this can be replicated in a place where it can be properly measured, there's not a whole lot you and I can do with that, right?
So can you guys comment on what is the method used to move the jar on its own?
You
watch the jar move on its own, and now what is your explanation for that?
So what the explanation is, I can't tell you because there are multiple ways people can do it. There are...
And what are those? None of those ways are, so I've heard people say like, oh, they tied a fish string to it, but you can see in the video there's nobody, you can see the whole area.
No, my friend, you simply cannot see the whole area.
Oh, okay. You're saying someone tied a fish string to it?
No. Again, I don't want to say that I don't want to declare Jimmy and Seth or said that the way they did it that time was specifically a fishing string. The reason why that one comes up is because it is conspicuous that fishing string and security cameras, they just can't detect fishing string. It's the wildest thing. There's actually other types of string out there, by the way. It's, as a former magician, if I ever want to make something levitate, I can make something levitate in front of people. And it ain't fishing string that I'm using, but it's a type of string that's more undetectable. There's as far as the options are lots of things. Magnets, the options are lots of things. A stick that is out of frame that you can't see because it's angled perfectly.
That's a glass jar, but I guess someone could have put metal buried in the weed there and used a magnet. Yeah, I would say that there is. People say like they're trying to get promotion for their pot shop, but if you guys know anything about the history of downtown Oregon City, it's a really bad history. It's a really creepy place. I'm sure a lot of cities are like that.
So one thing I'll tell you is this: the scissors that fall into the jar, as far as they are, you can see that they go from a higher point to a lower point. So as far as that goes, that can literally just be something was put in poorly and it eventually broke whatever was holding it, the grip something had on it that was holding it, and then it fell into the jar.
Right. That could be gravity. I agree with you on that. But that jar, I've been in that weed shop, and that's a sturdy, level metal surface. And I work next door. There's no shaking of any kind going on.
Well, first of all, you don't know that there was no shake. Again, I'm going to say there doesn't look like there's shaking because there's a cup with stuff next to it, right? But we're talking about a jar that moves a few inches one direction, and then in a different video seems to move the other direction and eventually tips over. I'm not trying to jump to any conclusions, but I just wonder what is the likely explanation for that? I know it could be a number of things. I guess so. You're going to go. I don't know. All right, let's just do this exercise quickly. It's going to be super fast. How many instances of confirmed ghosts have we ever seen move items?
Zero.
Zero, right.
Zero.
And how many instances of confirmed people trying to stage ghost moving stuff have happened. You don't need to know the exact number. But it's,
quadrillion, billion.
right. It's many. So let's just go with the I'm a skeptic. Which one is more likely? A new universal phenomenon that moved a jar, or the asshole in the video is the guy behind it, or somebody off screen, or somebody out of frame, or what?
That's fair. That's fair.
It's not a matter of what is the correct explanation, because I don't know. I would want to be there to investigate these things that happen on repeat and use means to measure what potentially could be going on. And I will say my expectation is going to be those are the day the ghosts don't mind the blueberries.
So everybody in that works in that area all has a ghost story, and they also do haunted. There's a guy that does haunted tours down there.
Yeah, and everybody who lives in Spain has seen the Mother Mary.
Right. But that's a little different, because those are people that are already believing. These are people that have no reason to those are people that are already with woo-woo beliefs. These are people that just are trying to work and do their job and go home.
No, sir. There's community aspects and cultural aspects to ghost beliefs and the like too. And it's usually the default amongst people to believe in some kind of ghost. And so then present something, it's not difficult. It's not difficult to play on that at all. I've worked in the Atlas Theater many times and booked the Atlas Theater many times in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it's supposed to be the most haunted theater or something in the country.
And there's nothing.
No,
there's nothing, right?
The ghosts never show up for me.
Right. And I watched Dan on last Halloween. He did that show from the most haunted hotel, and that was great. No, I agree. I see what you're saying.
Sorry, I've talked a lot. Seth, do you have thoughts here? Let's let Seth get a word in edgewise.
I'm enjoying the show. Yeah, but Jimmy's right. There is always some sort of preconditioning, environmental preconditioning going on. If you take someone and you place them in an environment where there is rumor or story or folklore, you have already sort of stacked the decks so that if they hear a rattle, or they see out of the corner of their eye a movement, or if there's video footage of something, I mean, that's probably the dot they're going to connect. But again, we come back to they said. Yeah. I know that ghost stories and ghost encounters are big business. And that's just the cynic in me. Well, it's the skeptic and the cynic, right? And I get it. If I had a hotel, hell, I'd want a haunted room in it too. And I'd want the elevators to ding all night. And I would tell the patrons, don't go near elevator 3 over here on the west corner after midnight. Because, it's been reported there's a woman in a wedding gown that her feet never touches the floor and the walls. I get that. But that stuff is big business. It's people travel the world to be a part of that, and they're primed. They're ready to connect that dot up here. But until we get this stuff in controlled conditions where the results can be measured and replicated, we're back to square one. Can you prove it? That's now a security camera video does not do it for me.
No, of scissors shifting.
It's legally unaltered 24/7 running in the state of Oregon. It must be running 24/7 legally unaltered video
in the dispensary where the weed is, and none of Kevin. Well, okay, I used to be a sleight of hand artist or whatever you want to call it.
What I'm interested in, Kevin, is
me that it's a setup, but can I just say that I also find it odd that someone would go to those lengths to do something like that?
I
do find it more likely.
Hell no.
I do find it more likely.
But, no, not at all.
I think you vastly underestimate our fellow human being, my friend. I think people would go to monumental lengths. And one of the reasons I'm suspicious of that is that they are having us talk about the encounter on this broadcast to thousands of people who are now going to go to that website to see the video in question.
Yeah. Yeah, Seth and I believe.
My intention, but
I
don't mind that a bit. I mean, I was glad to see it, but I think we just keep our skeptic hats on, and one day if they prove it, fantastic. I'd want to know that. Okay,
Kevin.
How would they go about proving it? Do you think?
I think Jimmy, aren't we talking about how they prove any other fact, right?
Yeah.
You take it into a controlled environment and you test and retest
Right.
where things can be measured, where it's not a security camera somewhere, which caught something at 3 a.m. and probably black and white or infrared. I mean, I think, we would test it the way we would test any other claim.
Yeah. As far as Kevin, the thing you said about like people going to those lengths, I think Seth and I suffer from the same addiction, but Seth, you can correct me if not. And that is, there is a drug-like addiction to speaking to a captive audience, to being listened to, especially in mass. I work 70 to 100 hours a week to keep making sure I get to keep having captive audiences. It is addictive.
Jimmy, I don't mean to interrupt. Jimmy,
Sure.
but you saw the guy on the video. He was just a worker there. He didn't care about. He doesn't care.
I don't know that. I don't know what his motivation is. I don't know what his mindset is. I don't know anything.
Well,
I don't know
neither
his intention.
I.
And that's the point. That if you and I can agree, we don't know what's going on in his head, which means he may be complicit, or at least he may have been primed to believe it. Well, I think that's where that conversation begins. Right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
I totally agree. It's whether he is the one doing it, or, I mean, we just had that when Forrest and I did the show recently. No, it was Forrest and Erica's show, and then somebody called in with ghost stuff, and they were emailing it to me. And by the end of the call, I had gone from thinking that the woman we were talking to was behind a prank, basically, and trying to convince us, to I thought she was probably the victim of her family trying to convince her that these ghosts exist. Because when they sent me the video of the ghost evidence, which was a drawer that you did not see on all sides opening, in fact, you only saw from the front, a drawer opens and then closes itself. And then the other was somebody was casting to the television an image. So ghosts have Microsoft Paint now, at the very least, if not Adobe Photoshop, but it was of these stock image prayer hands and the caption, "Please forgive me." So they're also participating in e-commerce and buying stock photos, which is great of them. The economy is struggling. Whether the person in the video is a victim of the same prank or a participant doesn't matter. It's quite irrelevant overall to do ghosts exist, where we know liars do. And I have no problem looking at this video and going, this is wholly unimpressive. Incredibly
just to
unimpressive.
Kind of steel man you guys here, just to let you know, I've been underground. There's a bunch of underground. There's called the Shanghai tunnels here in Oregon, where pirates used to rule the waters. They used to Shanghai people and take them on ships and say you're either a slave or walk the plank. Kind of a brutal history, but I've been underground in this old, creepy underground. I've been all around. Nothing. No ghosts, no sign of nothing.
Yeah, it's the same thing at the Atlas Theater. And then there's always, first of all, you're going to want to find out how many of the pirate stories you've heard are true, because every time you hear those things, it turns out most of them aren't. There's all these haunted places in Cheyenne. Apparently every building in downtown Cheyenne used to be a brothel where a prostitute died. It seems strange.
You'd think that would be haunted then. You'd think that would be haunted.
But that's what, I mean, that's their story, is that every single place downtown, you have the Atlas, there's this bar across from the Atlas, there was this furniture store I actually used to work at, and all these places are connected by these tunnels, and all of them tell the same story of this building was a brothel that a prostitute died at, and her ghost is here. And it's literally like, it's all the buildings. They were all brothels. It was nothing but brothels, downtown Cheyenne 100 years ago or whatever. Anyway, Kevin, I think this conversation was useful. We do want to move on because I've got quite a few more lined up. But
thank you very much for giving. That's all I wanted to hear is what you guys thought, and you guys articulated it all out, and I appreciate that. And now I'm kind of more convinced of your side. So I think find Kevin, it hard to believe someone would do that, but now I'm convinced.
Kevin, I would look up. Okay. I would look up both Occam's razor and Hitchens' razor, depending on whether you're familiar with either.
I know. Okay. I've been watching you guys for years. I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I know all about Hitchens. I know all of it. I know everybody on your show. I know it all.
Cool. Go look up those razors. We never did have Occam on the show, but I appreciate it.
I know Occam's razor.
All right. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right.
If you and I can talk, I know you've got a switchboard full of people, but I want to
we're good.
camp out here for just a second because
It's your show, sir.
No, I mean, I would encourage people to look up an illusionist and mentalist in the UK named Darren Brown,
Yes.
Derren Brown.
That's my
He
dude.
used to be a Christian. He is no longer. But if you think psychics can't know this fact about someone,
Yeah.
if you think no one could move objects without the supernatural, and if you feel that you could not be fooled, watch his videos on YouTube. He's also an amazing debunker. He did an experiment where he came to the United States and he took an actor or just an every dude and he told everyone he was a faith healer. And then he set up scenarios where people were healed or felt healed, etc. He actually went on tour with the guy, and at the very end, he told everyone, "I'm a fake." And even the people who were told he was a fake, some people did not want to believe it.
Yeah.
Therein we see a tremendous desire of people to believe. And here's another example. And I know someone who had a death in the family recently. And they would call themselves a very spiritual person, right? And everything's kind of a sign. And they look around and they're like, "Oh, I ran into Susan at the store today, and I feel like the universe was trying to tell me something." That's how they talk. So anyway, their loved one passed away. And the next day when they woke up, there was like a sparrow sitting on a tree branch, it perfectly framed in the window. And she said, "I just felt like that was her. I felt like that was her way of saying goodbye and that I'm watching you and that I'll always be with you," right? Well, how many sparrows are there in this particular part of the world? There's a ton of sparrows. You throw a rock, you will hit a sparrow.
Yeah.
But what we are seeing is this desire to attach meaning to these events where they might have seen a sparrow 1,000 times before. In that context, it meant something more, potentially a connection to another plane, another world, a connection to a ghost or a spirit. You can see how it happens. And the last thing I want to say is, I think the reason that we do need to keep our skeptic hats on is because there are people who have monetized this desire in people and are selling hope to the grieving and the vulnerable. They know exactly which buttons to push. They know exactly how to get you thinking, "Oh my God, this can't be a coincidence." And then they ask for your Visa card number. Yeah. And I think that is a connection that we must make in these conversations about ghosts and spirits, because a lot of the people out there have monetized our desire to believe, and we're the ones who pay, often financially.
And the psychic industry specifically in 2019, it was found that it's grown 52% since 2005. It's on the increase. They are what is it currently? $2.3 billion industry a year. Industry psychics are. It's 4 or 5 billion is astrology. And the moment this is that thing too, when people call and say, but it's not harming anybody. If it isn't true, and you gave money, somebody's spending money on the basis that it is, that's harm, period. It's just a wild.
We just did a show with Susan Gerbic of Skeptical Inquirer and the Guerrilla Skeptics, and we did a show called The Grief Vampires. Now, she is a debunker of these celebrity psychics who specifically target people who have lost someone, and they want to talk to their dead spouse or their dead parent or dead friend or whatever. And what these guys do, or females do, is that they will actually have a team go and pre-select. They will find your Facebook pages. They will find who you know, what your connections are, what your photos look like. They will learn all about you to find details that they will then later sell as revelation from the spirit world. Some of these people charge $400 an hour for an online session. And when you're selling hope and people are so desperate for hope in this world, you can see how good people, not necessarily stupid people, which is something I hear all the time and it makes me crazy. Same thing I hear with religion. Only an idiot would believe the Bible. Only a stupid, somebody who's defective would believe. You don't understand the power of indoctrination. You don't understand the brain. And where the hell is your empathy? But these grief vampires are everywhere, and they are literally selling an unproven hope to the hopeless. It's tragic.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, it's
sorry about the soapbox, Jimmy. This is what happens when you bring another host on. I'm just going to go, and you're going to have to hit the mute button. That's just what I do.
You're good. Okay. I'm getting my money's worth out of it. The appeal of denial is something that no matter how fucking smart you think you are, because that's usually what it is. It's not a matter of how smart a person actually is, but let me tell you how smart I believe I am. No matter how smart you are, the appeal of denial is in in all of these cases. Religion, that's what religion runs off. Psychics, that's what psychics run off. That comfort you get, even with astrology and tarot, denial is not necessarily the perfect word for it, but the comfort of pretending that life isn't chaotic and you can just ascribe the future as you like or recognize the future before it happens is a type of comforting denial as well. And I'm hoping that the tarot trend, especially amongst the current atheist skeptic community, where it's a lot of people who say, well, I don't believe in it. I just support the institution by financially buying stuff. And then I do this fun secular version that's more about introspection. I hope that trend dies quickly.
I mean, I don't have a problem with somebody who enjoys the aesthetic of Satanism, like the Satanic Temple.
Different.
I mean,
yeah,
you know, if everybody knows, everybody's open about it, but you enjoy the tradition or again, I think the word aesthetic. You were speaking about different things. Then are you saying that they are buying into a supernatural flavor of it?
I'm saying the performative aspect that is still financially supportive of the industry at large.
Oh.
So. Satanism, you give your money to the Satanic Temple and it goes to a charity that supports secular stuff. If I like Mormonism, I want to go back and drink Sprite and sherbet again, Mormon punch, and have funeral potatoes, and I start giving them 10% of my income to enjoy the aesthetic, I'm now participating in the evil I don't believe in.
I buy that.
And there's a conspicuous element of they're very quick to point out how much they don't believe in it when you actually ask them about it. However, when you see them around other believers, there's no faith challenging going on anywhere, and their cosplay of this belief is extremely believable, I've noticed.
You grazed against something else as the caller's on hold are cussing me out, but this is important, and it relates to belief in the supernatural. I think this is one of the reasons that we have committed ourselves as humanists to finding real-world solutions to problems and to alleviating suffering on this planet in the here and now. Because I'm convinced as long as there is suffering and people are locked in poverty and feel there is no hope they'll ever get out, and as long as people aren't given the tools to be able to navigate grief after a spouse was killed in a car wreck, if people are oppressed by governments and have no hope, no joy, they suffer every single day, it's understandable how they would look to the heavens and yearn for that day when they will be whole, when they will be happy, when they will have a mansion, when there will be no war, no pain, no cancer, no grief, no car accidents, no nothing, only joy and bliss. That's totally understandable. And until we create a world where those problems have been alleviated and where we have wiped out suffering, we are going to see people construct their own happy endings, their own coping mechanisms. And it's one of the reasons that we must focus ourselves in a greater capacity in solving problems. And we have to curse the darkness out there, but we also have to shine some light and create some tangible, real-world, hand-on solutions to our fellow human beings suffering. And I think if we try to address the superstition without alleviating suffering, we're in the quicksand. We'll never get our goals accomplished.
Don't know how we could. I just saw a thing in the chat. Last thing before we go to the next call. that I do want to address because I clearly owe the audience an apology. I see Shannon Q is in the chat, which to me establishes that Shannon Q was available at this time, and you could have had a much more capable host here on the line with Seth Andrews, and so I do apologize.
I thought you were going to say a much more capable guest.
No.
I was like, well, that's probably true. Actually, I've met Shannon, and she's damn good.
Shannon works here.
Oh, yeah.
What I'm sorry that I have shorted everybody by putting myself on tonight's episode, but I did it so a little bit selfishly as well. I enjoyed the time I get to spend with Seth. It's few and far between. Though we are working on a charity event next month together, so it won't be as long till I see you the next time. So that's going to be fun. Anyway, moving on to the next call, we have Cassie in, I think, California. Cassie in California. Cassie with a K. You are on the line.
Hi there.
Hello.
I am from California.
Excellent.
I do have to say about the haunted weed shop, Jimmy, I think that ghost just wanted to get high.
Could be.
Maybe, listen, it might not compare to the cocaine that he was being able to do as a pharmacist in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
But, like, imagine going from, like, coke having cocaine in it to, like, no high in the afterlife.
I just feel a ghost is less likely to be a pothead and more likely to be an alcoholic, as I see them being much more likely to be addicted to spirits. Anyway, go on. Yep, I did that. Everybody scoffed. There wasn't one person who didn't scoff. Go on.
And Seth, I have to pay you this compliment before I get to what I called in about. You are like atheist Jeff Goldblum.
I'll take that.
I could listen to you talk just all day.
Thank you. I don't have his mannerisms, which I adore. You know, he's got that thing, and he does his hands, and I can't replicate it because I can't do impersonations. I'm a huge Jeff Goldblum fan, so if I'm anywhere in his zip code, go ahead.
Yeah, your cadence is very similar to him in Jurassic Park. Like, when you talk about things, I just flash on the scene of, like, when he's doing the drop of water with Laura Dern and, like, the OG Jurassic Park.
I'm waiting for someone to find my excessive uses of us and ums as charming as he does, but so far people just complain. Anyway, Cassie,
I'll take it. Thank you, Cassie.
I called in about horror movies.
Cool.
And I really think that horror movies have a super interesting place in society. And we've kind of seen, like, an evolution of what we find horrific. And I grew up watching, like, the old Universal monster classics. Big Vincent Price fan. You know, he's very iconic and in the best version of The Last Man on Earth. And, like, his humanity in that film where he's like, there are no ghosts, and, like, the idea of, like, what would happen if the dead did come back. And I was just curious about, like, the tradition of ghost stories and how you think that really relates in a human sense of, like, why it's so, like, appealing.
You waiting for me, Jimmy? Or
waiting on you.
Well, I've seen a series of long-form documentaries about the role of horror and how it is really a reflection of the culture of the time. And what scares us as human beings changes based on the generation that we live in. And you mentioned the old Hammer horror icons, you know, the things that go bump in the night, the monsters themselves. But then you get into the mid-20th century and we saw the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So now people are terrified of us nuking ourselves to death. And what did the horror movies have? We had nuclear fueled giant creatures, you know, whether it's the ant or the tarantula or something else.
Zombies.
The satanic panic, right? We saw that fueling films like The Exorcist and Demons and all of these others. And so I think horror has often reflected where we are as a culture and what is scaring us in that cultural moment. I find it interesting. You know, you'll see, was it the Hostel films, which I'm not a big fan of, but I mean, those films essentially addressed xenophobia, the fear of the foreigner. the American travels abroad and look at what happens. And, there's a lot of social commentary, I think, that is covertly and overtly present in a lot of really good horror films out there. And I think you make a good point.
Well, something that's like interesting to me are like these franchises that perpetuate and cross generational lines. Like Scream just had its 6th film release, and I won't go into details about Scream 6, but I was sitting there because I know like Scream 4 happened in like 2011, and when they announced Scream 5, I was like, I feel like we've outgrown Scream, technologically speaking, where it's just not as scary anymore to like, who's picking up their phone from an unknown number, right? Like,
well, if I can interject quickly,
ID
though, Cassie, I think that's commerce. I think they said, "Oh, we made a shit ton of money." I feel the same way. But when Halloween 1978 came out, it was one of the most terrifying things people had ever seen, right? And now Michael Myers is a meme, right?
Yeah.
He sure is.
He's just he's not scary in that way. We've just gone past that cultural moment. But I think they're milking the franchise because he is a household name. I think that's a different phenomenon there. I think that's just commerce.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me about the Scream franchise specifically, though, is that the first film is just a perfect film. It's a perfect horror movie. It's self-aware of the tropes in all the right ways, very feminist for the time, just such a
Cassie, I'm going to encourage some brevity here, as the theme of the show won't be admiration for which scary movies we like. But
anyway,
if we can wrap around to something.
I found a way to stay relevant, or how like ghost stories are back in trend. Like I was watching Crimson Peak or like The Haunting of Hill House, and like I feel like ghost stories, especially now, have taken into this idea of like the time that's passed, and like what we yearn for in the past, and how we miss people,
sure,
and how that impacts us in the present. And versus like, ooh, ghosts are so scary. Like ghost stories can be terrifying, but they're also done in this very like way more romanticized now with like Guillermo del Toro and things like that.
Sure.
Which I just find very interesting for the time we're living in.
Fair enough.
Well, thank you, Cassie. Any other questions before we let you go?
No, I'm good.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Cassie.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
I must take issue. Scream 1 was not a perfect film. I'm sorry. Rose McGowan, you are in a garage filled with tools and other accoutrements that you could use for self-defense, and your solution is to try to crawl out of the doggy door.
Yeah.
Out of the doggy door. Wrong with people. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sure everyone wants to know then, what is your favorite horror movie?
Oh, it changes from day to day. I have a fondness in my heart for the original Halloween because it was the first film of its kind I'd ever seen. And that is a perfect film. With almost no blood, it got under your skin. And I think it's not possible to replicate that cultural moment. I mean, it was 1978. We were right there getting into the satanic panic. Everybody was, but we'd never seen anything quite like it. And of course, now we're so jaded. There are a lot of really good, I like the original ones. A lot of people hate on Hereditary, but it was so original and such a slow burn, and it was intelligent. It made you think.
Yeah.
Those types of things. I don't go in for gore porn. I think those are lazy. Yeah. I like the ones where it doesn't even necessarily show you what's around the corner. It allows you to fill in those blanks, which can often be so much more effective. It's like reading a good book. You're creating the mental picture. You are now a participant as much as you are a spectator. And I think those are the most effective ones.
Is there a creator now who you still get excited when, this summer, so-and-so's next film?
Well, I'm interested in a lot of the indie filmmakers that are thinking out of the box. She mentioned Guillermo del Toro. He's probably my favorite filmmaker right now. He's got a lovely Spanish film that's dark. It's not really a ghost story. It's more like a dark adult fairy tale or fantasy called Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
That is must watch. It is just another perfect film. But
yeah, that's not really considered new anymore, Seth, but I get you.
I know. I didn't. Did I say new? I didn't mean new. But like he came out with Pinocchio, which is another really kind of an adult fairy tale to stop motion.
Yeah.
But I'm tired of this commercialized, rubber stamped, super glossy kind of. I mean, fine. If it rings your bell, I would never hate on somebody else's love of like the Marvel films. There are some great ones.
Nah, it's okay. We can shit on people who like the Saw movies. I know that's what you're getting at. Let's just do it.
I'm just saying. I at some point, and there's a law of diminishing returns where the greater the danger, the less I care.
Yeah.
So if someone comes in and says, if they get the plutonium, everything in the multiverse will be destroyed. This doesn't connect at all with. I don't feel that danger.
Yeah.
But if you take a character that I have come to love and connect with on screen, one person, and you put that person in peril, I'm on the edge of my seat. Oh my God, don't go in that room or they're going to get you.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see a lot more of this sort of personalized, involved storytelling instead of, oh my God, the planet will blow up if we don't disarm the device. Those things to me are so tired. I'm tired of them. I'd like to see something more personal out there.
Yeah, I think this era's emerging director who's turned out to be incredible at it has got to be Jordan Peele, but that's maybe the predictable answer.
I saw, speaking of horror films, David Cronenberg's son, Brandon Cronenberg, is a twisted man.
Yeah, it's predictable though, isn't it?
Infinity Pool. I got to the end of Infinity Pool and said, what the fuck did I just watch? Like, I can't even recommend it to anybody because it's so twisted. Like, did I like it? I don't know. Did I watch it all? Yes. Was I entertained? Okay. But I can't recommend it. It's that screwed up.
Yeah. I measure it in how much I think about it afterwards. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's burned in. It's embedded.
Yeah. We've got somebody who's calling in with a fun stage name, I suppose. Cumulative is on the line. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm glad to be here. I saw the theme Ghost Stories, and I have to call in. There's just so much to talk about on this subject, like stuff that scares you when you were little, and okay, the thing that I want to talk about, the thing that was at the front of my mind was the story of the ghost train. And I'm sure, actually, I haven't heard many stories about this from other kids, but I have heard it from, media and movies and games and stuff. And I just... Hello?
Yeah, no, we're here.
Oh, sorry.
We're here.
Yeah, I just thought that...
Hasn't seemed like a time to jump in yet.
Oh, sorry.
No,
but yeah, the thing that haunted me so much while I was growing up was at night while I was little. I had this favorite set of curtains that my parents would put up in front of my windows. It had these colorful little cars and trucks and stuff in primary colors and basic shapes. And this was just at the age when I was sleeping alone in my own room. And for many nights, I don't know if you remember how sensitive your senses are when you're little. You can read by the streetlights from the other side of the block coming in through curtains. And you can hear the freight train that is so far away that everyone else in your family, that your parents can sleep soundly. But to me, it sounded like the train's lights were right outside my window and the train was whooshing right by. And my bed was on the second floor of the house. And I could swear that this train was about to bust in through that wall and harm me, or worse, get me in trouble with my parents somehow. And my parents, what felt like the worst part of it was that my parents never believed me. And they would laugh about it, and I started to become like, are my parents in cahoots with the ghost train?
Mm.
And it just, I don't know if that was the thing, or if it's if that was the thing that sparked other fears in that house. For example, Like there was a flower, an empty, shoot, I don't remember if it was empty or not. There was a vase that you hung on the wall near the entrance to the house. And for some reason, I hated being near that thing. And I don't remember if I thought there was a ghost there or if I just didn't like being in, like, because it was near the entrance, it was where you take your shoes off. So maybe I just didn't like being in a dirty part of the house. But yeah, it was just that and just so many, it just felt like that house was populated by more and more ghosts as I was growing up in that place.
So are you calling to share that this is something that you still wonder about? Is it sort of like with the guy who's called before, what's the explanation, or just sort of here's a list of things that fooled me and now I've, as a skeptic, figured out that my parents were right not to believe my instincts?
I just wanted to share some like just scary stuff from my childhood.
Sure.
And like, I mean, at the front of my mind, I don't believe in ghosts, but when it's dark and just not the right amount of quiet, then I still do get unsettled. But
how old were you?
I do have a cat, and he keeps me comfortable.
How old were you?
I was, I believe, around 6 years old when the train was really bothering me.
So when I was 6, I had problems with my eardrums, and when I would try to fall asleep, I could hear them. I actually still can hear them when I try to sleep, but they're much fainter now. I had problems with my eardrums, and so you just hear a boom, 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 and it sounded like an aluminum style thing. And at 6 years old, in my head, there was a person hitting a metal drum in my ear. So kids are fucking stupid. We have to start there. Whatever idea you had at 6 years old of what the cause of any of these sounds were, even, I hope by now you go, I don't actually even know for a fact that I was hearing a train in the distance. I could have been hearing something else that I ascribed to being a train in the distance. I had 4 older brothers, not above putting a stereo outside my window with a ghost train sound. That would have actually been kinder than many of their pranks were. But yeah, I don't know. It's, but yeah, we appreciate any thoughts from you, Seth, before we move to the next?
I have nothing to add. No, it's an interesting story. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you, Q. Do try not to manipulate a nation of people into voting for Donald Trump next time, okay? Are you not that Q?
Time?
Is that the Q you are? Sorry, I mix up my Qs. Sorry, we'll see you next time. Thanks, Q.
Next time.
I find most sobering often the ghost stories that are connected to real world tragedy. There's a gravity to those that I find sometimes very effective. I'm reminded of a ghost story that remains rampant in Japan after the Japan tsunami, right? That killed 9,000 people and injured so many more and destroyed so much of Japan. And there were these reports that taxi drivers would see people on the streets and they would pick them up and they would say, take me to this place. And it would be one of the places that was destroyed by the tsunami and has yet to be rebuilt. For practical applications no longer exists. And they would turn around and say, well, this place isn't a place. I mean, you can't even go there. And the person who had gotten in the cab would have disappeared. And these ghost passengers, this has become a common story among the taxi driver community throughout Japan. And those are compelling stories. I find they're really good at eliciting chills because they're linked to this real world tragedy that adds a depth, I think, some layers to the onion.
Yeah, there's something very much more interesting about ghost stories from other places and other cultures because they're going to have, like, when we hear about, for example, near-death experiences in America, I can guess 5 elements of every near-death experience that's going to happen in America because culturally, they're all thinking of the same stuff. They're all influenced by the same stuff. And they're all going to have these same different ideas of what heaven would have looked like and which family members would have been there to greet and all these sorts of things that are common because it's all based on the same culture of people who believe in the same ways. It's very interesting, especially when you get into some of the older ghost stories coming out of, I've read a lot of the old like Asian ghost stories, and they are much more interesting because if you don't know the history of the cultures behind them, they seem much more different and much more freaky and much more out of place and much more to somebody like us. This almost is more tempting of like, well, this is at least ghosts acting bizarrely in a way I would almost expect to see instead of these vanilla ghosts in America. But then you find out that sort of in that same way, that it's influenced by something that's happened historically in that area. And they're way, way more interesting to me than, you know, I had a near-death experience and I met Jesus and my Uncle Bob. Those don't get me as much. We have last call of the night before we do the super chats. Get your super chats in if you want to get a question in before the show is over. But we've got Tennille. Tennille, well, I don't know what you've just said, but you are on the line. Did someone text you? Is that what I heard?
No, it was a beep. I don't know. I just was saying hi.
Oh, yeah. That's us. We're the beep. You are on the line.
Hi.
Hello.
This first time calling because I felt like I finally had something to say.
Go ahead.
So when I was like 10, I remember seeing a ghost and, as a first-hand witness.
Let me cut in with my pedantry right at the beginning. Do you want to phrase it that you saw a ghost, or do you want to phrase it that you remember at 10 years old seeing something you believed was a ghost?
The second option.
There we go.
Because I'm an atheist now.
Sure. All right, proceed.
So it's like, I remember that it was nowhere near sleep. It was like the middle of the day. I was playing a video game, laying on the couch down in like our like rumpus room. And my sister was like at the other end of the room. Like I was wide awake. And I look up at the end of the couch. So it was the kind of couch that you could like walk all the way around because only one end was attached was against the wall. And I look up and I think it's my brother for a second because like it's the same height. It looks like a little boy and he's just facing me and just staring at me. And like a few seconds after glancing, I'm like, that's not my brother. And like, I remember just staring at this person for like ages until like I must have finally looked away or something and then it was gone. So it's like the weirdest experience because I know it wasn't my brother. He was like upstairs or something. My sister was at the other end of the room. I wasn't asleep. I'm an atheist now and don't believe in ghosts. But to this day, I'm like, what was my brain doing with that?
Sure, Seth, after you. Forgive me,
Yeah,
I got a last minute text from a lady, and now I'm all yours. I'm fascinated by those types of encounters, and I feel like the brain often fills in the blanks with some of the things that scare us the most. I think it's often what we don't see that really, really gets us. And there's some pareidolia, and there's, where we see shapes that look like people, or they look like animals, or they look like something we can reference in our culture. And we're like, oh my God, it's shaped like that. And I think those things are fascinating. I'm glad that you are self-aware enough to know that, it was probably a perception thing much more than a reality thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've got like heaps of other ghost stories from when I was young because, until I was like 15 or 16, I was like a soft atheist. I didn't believe in God, but I still loved like the idea of reincarnation and like ghosts and spirits. And for a while, I was convinced that a crow at my high school was my reincarnated older brother that died. So like, I've grown out a lot of those beliefs, but this one in particular, I was just like, I know it's probably not a ghost because ghosts and souls are, not real, but it's just a fun story that I do tell.
What's a reason you've entertained for yourself as potentially a more likely explanation than a ghost?
I've never been able to figure out another explanation. I just know that it's not a ghost because I don't believe in ghosts.
But I mean, the bar is low. The bar is low for what's more likely, right? So hallucinating, full-on hallucinating that is more likely than a ghost, correct?
Oh, 100%.
Right. So there's one. We've got one thing on the list of we know hallucinations exist. We can demonstrate them. We have no such demonstration of ghosts. 2, there was a person, and when you looked away, they left. And you just never figured out who it was, whether it was a person who was supposed to be there or not to be there. Sounds creepy still, unfortunate still, unpleasant still. I would find that to be scarier than a ghost now because I don't believe in ghosts, but the potential that some unwanted person was in my home, potentially a friend of the brother who you thought it was at first because of height and physical features, but then you realized it wasn't him. Option 3, it was your brother, but with a modified appearance. I don't know. To me, it's literally just going, if I have to come up with a list of, I can't explain to you what it was. I can't tell you how it happened because I can't move back to whenever you were 10 years old and observe it. But as far as like just coming up with a list of things that are ultimately satisfying enough to go like, yeah, so it was likely something. It was probably one of these. And to sort of let it go as in any sort of angsty, well, what if it still was a ghost way, I don't find particularly challenging. And I have my own stories from childhood. Learning that when I was an adult, I had learned about sleep paralysis and the ways people hallucinate during sleep paralysis. And then basically went, cool, well, that explains almost all of them. So it's, yeah, I don't know.
I have sleep paralysis. I have several episodes a year, and Natalie wakes me up. And, back when I was religious, I felt like, there may have been an actual presence in the room.
Yeah.
And once you get into understanding what is going on with the brain and the body, the rest of the body, it's, demystifies it. It still sucks, but I don't wake up thinking maybe I had tapped into some dark spirit realm kind of thing. By the way, if I'm ever haunted by a ghost, I would like that ghost to have an Australian accent. I think that's my favorite accent, Tennille. It's my favorite accent.
Nice one. Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny thing about my accent?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Everyone here in Australia thinks I have an American accent.
I can hear that. While I'm not Australian, I am British, and my mother has that sort of, I can hear the differences between everyone who in America hears my mother's accent and goes, oh, are you British? But British people are like, wow, you really sold out your voice to the Americans. I can hear why that probably happens, why amongst Australians yours is like. I like an English Chilean accent. That's my favorite. That's very, very seductive.
The reason
I didn't say seductive. I did not say seductive.
Well,
I just said I enjoyed the accent.
Yeah. Yours was favorite. And
Tennille, I want that on the the I didn't say seductive. I was saying it's pleasant.
I wouldn't be upset.
My favorite would be the most seductive. That's
all right.
Consistent with my character. Anyway, Tennille, anything left before we wrap this up?
No, I'll just, end it with, I'm glad I finally had a reason to call in, as much as it's a bit of a non-starter because I don't believe the story myself.
Yeah.
I love your stuff, Seth Andrews, and fuck you, Jimmy.
Thanks. Bye, Tennille.
Thank you so much. There's a story.
There we go. It's the I'll just spoil it because usually I think it's funnier, but we don't have as much time tonight to let it keep playing out. I am very uncomfortable with compliments, and this is something that is known. And there was an episode a few months ago where Forrest and I were doing something, and I said, I'd way rather you all tell me to go fuck myself or fuck you, Jimmy, or something, than pay me any sort of compliment.
Thank you for the context of that. I thought, wow, strange way to show affection.
Yes, it is. It is something of a meme on this channel. Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Cool. In fact, there are So it's JGFY, Jimmy, go fuck yourself. Some people do GFYJ, but there are emoticons or whatever you call them, emojis coming to members soon with those.
It's like calling cognitive dissonance. Everybody ends their call by saying glory hole. I get that. You got a thing going here. Good for you.
Yeah. So we're going to finish up with Super Chats. Get your Super Chats in now. Anything $5 or more, we will read out and respond to. We're going to start with some fancy motion. And it's good that I explained it because this is going to end that way. 1999 from Clayton Smith. Question for Seth. Will you be doing any events with the atheist community of Tulsa soon? Also, can you say hi to my friend Nathan? Thank you, Seth. And Jimmy, go fuck yourself.
Hi, Nathan. Yeah, sure. I love you with the love of the Lord. And may the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine down upon you and be gracious unto you. Hi, Nathan. Anyway, I'm actually working with the atheist community of Tulsa, my hometown, to perhaps do an event in mid-July. We're still nailing down a venue. It'll be just a humble tour stop where I come out and we'll chill, and I'll do a presentation with a PowerPoint, and mostly we'll just hang out. I believe our tentative date is July 15th, and you can find all of my speaking tour dates on my website, SethAndrews.com. And thank you, Clayton.
If all goes well, Seth doesn't know this because I haven't invited him yet, but if all goes well, that website with the events will list an event called LineCon in 2024. Once we have all the details out, and we can reach out to Seth and see if the dates work for him.
Cool.
Yeah, we're planning our very own first LineCon for next year. $10 from RPG Debunks. I'm working on a book, but I've hit a severe case of writer's block over a year, brought on by the worry it's going to suck. Any advice to get over this worry? Also, Jimmy, go kindly sit on a toy. Sometimes they get clever with the insults. I'll let you answer this by yourself because my answer is going to involve ChatGPT, and no one wants to hear that.
Sure. Yeah, I've written, if you count ghost stories, 5 books, and I've written a ton of other just types of material, and I struggle with that. In fact, I think it was in Sacred Cows, I was talking about my own process, which is inspiration. I have a great idea, and I started, and I'm excited, and I'm getting knee deep, and all of a sudden, by the time I'm halfway through it, I'm really starting to doubt myself. Would anybody even want to read this? I think it sucks. And then, I get a little further and I want to throw the whole thing out the window and burn the pages and, curse the darkness and blah, blah, blah. And then maybe by the end, I've become encouraged again. When I hit a block, when I feel like I'm just not connecting, I have to physically walk away. And I don't mean just an hour. I don't mean just a day. I mean, I have to walk away sometimes on the order of weeks. It is amazing what leaving it and coming back with fresh eyes can do. I also wait till I feel like my brain, all the cylinders are firing up here. Like some days I feel like it's work, I'm foggy, there's allergies, I'm not in my best, I'm not rested, I just got back from a tour date or whatever. But on those days when you wake up and you feel like, man, I'm really connecting, I find my computer, a laptop, I find a way to start mashing out ideas and to flesh things out. Those are targets of opportunity in your schedule that you need to be prepared to optimize. Yeah. But if you're stuck, don't force it. Walk away, come back later, take a fresh look. It may help you. Yeah.
You can also feed the entire book to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, where would you go next with this? And see if it gives you any good ideas. Have you ever, I'm curious, because I wrote, I'm going to guess 70% of a book, and then I decided to abandon it. And the reason wasn't because it sucked. It was because despite the fact that the abuses in the book are true, I somehow felt I can't bring myself to, while my family is still alive, at the very least, and maybe even beyond then, it was basically the story of my upbringing. And there's a lot of abuse in it. And I just couldn't do it. So I just abandoned it. Have you abandoned any books? Are all of your books finished?
There's only one that's I say this. Fox News was kind of autobiographical, but Deconverted, I got into my family a little bit, but in the introduction, I made clear that nothing I'm about to say to you is designed to shame my family, who genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. The difference is I wasn't really subject to any kind of abuse. I mean, we had health theology and other types of things, but I really came from a loving, supportive family who was trying to do the best thing, and they would have, both my mother and father would have walked into traffic to save any of us, So my situation is different. I think for some people, it's a liberation exercise to be able to go through their own journey and to share it with others who may be encouraged by it. Whether they change the names or some of the circumstances. But I think only the person telling the story can decide what boundary line they are comfortable with. And if you've come to that point where you're like, I just don't want to do it while they're still alive, I think that's valid. That's fair. I mean, that's a decision for you to make. Yeah, it's as much as I hate my upbringing, I can't create a situation that would cause thousands of people to, at minimum, I just don't see them getting out of it without receiving hate and people trying to track them down and interfere. Sure, and that's not your goal. Your goal is not to, it's not punitive against the people who harmed you, either directly or indirectly. It was to relay a story that explains you and potentially helps others. And if the cost benefit on that is not worth it, I understand waiting totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, $5 from Sheridan Bernasconi. How many days until Halloween, Seth? Thanks for having Seth on tonight, Jimmy, but go fuck yourself.
I believe today is 175 days to Halloween. Someone needs to check me. That's just off the cuff. Halloween being my favorite holiday, I decorate to the nth degree. 175, right?
You just tracked that, I guess.
It was a few days ago. I actually looked it up because I was counting down. My wife's horrified. She is a summer person. I'm a fall person.
Me too.
You got 175 and counting, my friend. We'll get there. Sheridan.
I will say I moved to Texas last year, and this was my first spring in Texas, winter, spring. March, April in Texas and near Austin is just about the best weather I mean, there was a couple of storms that broke it up, but if I could live somewhere where it's that all the time, but a house, a 2-bedroom house doesn't cost $1 million like LA, I'd move there, wherever that place is. Yeah.
I get that.
Kathleen Moncrief sends 20 Canadian dollars. I love ghost stories because you can get really into them and go along for the scary ride, but you don't stress about them afterwards because ghosts aren't real. Much more fun than reality-based horror.
Good point. And I think, we are creatures of imagination, and I love sort of stretching that muscle. I like to see the creativity in people. And I think it's most fun sometimes when it's good enough that they help us scare ourselves. That's a good point.
Have you ever tried virtual reality?
I'm the most motion sick person I've ever met. I was telling Noah Illusions the other day that I almost made myself nauseous playing poker on Oculus. That's how bad I am. So no, I really haven't gotten too much into VR.
It would be very fun if we're ever in the same space. I have some. So motion sickness is usually solved because I also suffer from it. It's usually solved from extremely low latency. And I have some headsets that can pull it off. I'd love to see you, if you're willing, in a horror game in Oculus. in VR.
If you want to see me scream like a child, that sounds like a party.
I just remember my favorite is the ghost hunters from an old South Park episode. Oh my God, someone peed my pants. Look, no, I think it's more of there's a moisture. It's gathering in my pants. What's happening? Yeah.
Be me.
Oh, I think I skipped. Sorry about that. 25, whatever RON is as far as currency goes. I don't know. But you clearly ruined Halloween from me. That's from Ashlesh.
How did I ruin Halloween?
It might have been me. I don't know. That was sent some time ago. That was at.
Okay. Sorry about that. If I did, it's not my intention. Okay.
So they don't even mean the movie because we hadn't gotten to the movie yet. 13 minutes into the show. I don't know.
I don't know. I think Halloween, just behind Christmas, the most popular holiday in the United States, much to the chagrin of the fundamentalists. I just love it.
I imagine that came in around the time that I was saying in defense of doing the show in May. It makes it look like we're not trying to ruin Halloween. And it may have just been simply in response to that. Yeah. James Call says, as an Eagle Scout, we would tell the Tenderfoot Scouts about the clifftop monster, then run around and shake the guy lines of their tents at 0100. In Scouts, we just did the snipe prank. I never did this one. Yeah.
Points for that. Very creative.
$5 from Blake Walker. The pot shop is the like elf on a shelf. When nobody is looking, a human spills the edibles just like a human moves the elf, or it's just a lie. Yeah, they've got a Toy Story situation going on over there at the pot shop.
Yeah.
$20 from Micro Addict. Jimmy Rules, huge fan of Seth. I've assumed that Jimmy Rules is an insult because we know how it's supposed to work on this channel. Compliments are insults, insults are compliments. Huge fan of Seth. Favorite ghost is in Xylem gastrotricha, a microscopic, okay, great.
Wow.
Ghost-like moves on my channel. So it's apparently a ghost-shaped thing, microorganism, which moves like a ghost, and you can all go and check that out. But I love you too, except for when you try to make me read words that make me that expose how stupid of a person I am.
That's funny.
Nilly Wilson says, "Are my parents in cahoots with the ghost train?" Best quote ever.
Out of context, it's even better. Like you just say it to somebody.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. 550 from Christ Puncher. Can we get Seth hosting with Lucien Greaves for a spooky Halloween show? That would be awesome. Jimmy, go sublate yourself with dirty LDS underwear. You know, I never wore the magic underwear. But as far as Seth and Lucien doing a show together, remind me in August, September, and I'll see what their availability is. But I only booked a month and a half out.
Lucien Greaves, co-founder of the Satanic Temple, was one of my guests on my show number 666, which happened in the month of March. And as I hit that milestone number, I'd reached out. He's a buddy. And I'm like, hey, Lucien, would you like to join me and a couple of other Satanists, including Aron Ra? And we spent an hour just hanging out and talking for show number 666. That was a lot of fun. So, yeah, terrific.
Incredible. Chris Nelson, hi from Bermuda. Would love to know your guys' opinions on Black Mirror. I was actually thinking of an episode of Black Mirror when we were talking about the denial and the ghost stuff. There's an episode where a person basically has, it might be in the first season. If it's not, it's early in the second. But it's a person's loved one, husband has died. And she basically has all the data of him collected and then turned into essentially an AI, which can text her as though it's him. And so it speaks like him and stuff. And then eventually that gets upgraded to a phone call, and then eventually it gets upgraded to a humanoid robot. And I was just thinking about that. There's some parallels to the ways in which we would be eager to embrace that for people to have some sort of built-in loved one into an earpiece, whether it's someone from the past or potentially for a lonely person just to have. That same instinct, I think, drives people to believe in ghosts.
I think Black Mirror, probably more than most shows right now, has tapped into the culture and has tied in technology, the best and often the worst. You know, how something can be used to, I don't know, the way they've integrated the shows are so freaking meta.
Yeah.
That while they are great storytelling, they are also commentary. And they have struck an amazing balance with Black Mirror. I haven't seen any of the last episode, the last season, but up to that, I'm pretty caught up, and it's impressive stuff.
I'm actually, the reason why I know it's in season 1 or 2 is because I've only so far watched the first 2 seasons and recently decided to, I don't get a lot of time to watch TV that actually I have to pay attention to. I like having TV on in the background when I work to sort of occupy that part of your brain that if it's silent, you'll start getting distracted. Sure. But I don't have a lot of time to watch much attention TV, but Black Mirror is currently when I do find that little time. I do that with Black Mirror. So you know, I'm probably 6 months away from caught up, I think. $20 from Pam Demonium. This was fun. Neurological disorders can be a cause of faulty perception, resulting in superstition. I have hallucination, but I'm aware of it and get a kick out of it now. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Greetings, Seth. Thanks to all.
I think understanding the mechanisms that are in play, I mean, that's huge and good for you.
That's a win, yeah. $5 from the Vanilla Ghost. There are cemeteries full of the ghosts of people who paid Jimmy compliments. Careful, you'll invite the CIA to this show. Or FBI, I don't know who would do it. $5 from Toy Ranch. My mom is a Christian and wants them to remove references to Holy Ghost from the Bible and just use Holy Spirit because it's not Christian to believe in ghosts. That's a wild ride.
But if a spirit is a ghost and a ghost is a spirit, I don't know. I mean, she's obviously got a definition for ghost that is linked, I think, to the dark underworld and perhaps Satan himself. That's interesting.
It would seem, but give up the ghost, isn't that part of, even Jesus gave up the ghost? Whatever.
I don't know.
11 euro or pounds from Mar. Is hypnosis real? I've been told it's not real a lot, but I'm not sure because it has never worked on me. Jimmy, don't sit on a toy. Darren Brown does some hypnosis exposure stuff too, as I recall, and it's also very good. But the short answer is largely what you're understanding to be performative hypnosis, like magician hypnosis, that shit is bullshit. But there are things that people are still in the category of hypnosis, like that you can get done by therapists and stuff, that isn't. But yeah, the magician stuff is definitely BS. $5 from Jesus Wizard. Had ChatGPT write this super chat for me. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Skeptalk on the Line is a must watch. Fascinating guests and thought-provoking discussions. Keep it up. That's right. ChatGPT knows what's up. Trying to go a little bit faster here because we are trying to now wrap the episode. I did mention in the chat already that we upped the threshold to $10 a few minutes back, but we'll cover the ones that were that had already come in. $5 from Johnny. Seth, I'm curious about the timeshare arrangement you have with Todd Friel for The Voice. Was he off air while you recorded Cap and Dreamy's book? Go fuck yourself, Jimmy.
I don't even know what to do with that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of Todd Friel's voice. Is there a similarity there? I don't know. Hopefully it's a good voice. I mean, I don't know. I'll have to go look it up.
Yeah. Claire says, Gutsy Gibbons said she was the odd one out on the line for being agnostic. Refute or support this claim, then go fuck yourself. I had meant to talk to her about it, but didn't. But she's not the odd one out because she has the same position. I think it's more of that she uses the labels the way that some people mistakenly do too. The idea that agnostic is exclusive from atheist when it's not. And so, yeah, it's when I say I meant to talk to her, not to chastise her, but to ask her why she said that. And I'm sure we will discuss it at some point, probably on air, because it's a worthy clarification. BW Dingus says, glad to Seth on the line. Jimmy, you are the best self-lover ever. You don't know that. You've been reading my diary. $9.99 from Lena. I'm a Halloween child. Love Halloween. When I was a kid, my older and younger brother used to torment me with fake ghost stories and pranks. I was so mad when I found out they were all fake.
You poor thing.
Yeah.
Scarred for life. Glad you survived, though.
Yeah. It sounds like you had the ghost Santa experience. Jordan Kapler says, questions for both. If ghosts are real and you become one when you pass away, what would you do with your new ghostly powers? Any haunting?
You know, if I was a ghost, I would commit myself to proving ghosts. Like if I was there, I would be like, all right, well, let's go find a lab. Hey, let me go haunt someplace where some controlled environment where somebody can detect me and then the experiments can be played out. I would like to do that.
Yeah.
I would also like to go to Tucker Carlson's house and just throw everything on the floor. Every time he leaves, I just take all of the pictures on the wall, all the silverware, all the pots. I just want everything on the floor or out in the yard. Every time he leaves, I would like to do that as a ghost.
I think
but I'll do it.
I'd be chilling with a lot of wildlife because I already wish I could do that. Like, you know, I've had thoughts about if I woke up with Superman's powers, I'm not saving the world. I'm going and making a best friend out of a grizzly bear. Like that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Can't eat me now. So I don't know, probably something like that. $10 from Amargan. Seth, always awesome to see you here. Watch all your product. Hope everything is wonderful with you, Jimmy. You know what you can go do.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you for the kind words.
Hillhugger says, ghosts are cool, or so I'm told. Seth is the man. GCF, a goat. Sorry, ghost. I don't know what GCF or JGF. Oh, Jimmy, go fuck a goat. Yeah, I'm gonna say that the go fuck yourself is fine. As we're adding imagery of bestiality, perhaps the compliment starts to fade away. But that's just me. Micro Addict says, no joke, Jimmy, you do rule. This channel and the amazing guests are proof. Sorry, I should have said multicellular simple animal. It's okay. I forgive you. Bozeman42 says, I don't much care for ghost stories. I remember watching a TV series that I didn't know anything about, thinking it was a crime mystery. Then it became supernatural horror, and I was instantly bored.
Totally fair. You know, I think whatever resonates with you, I think that's fair.
There's a show that's hosted by, maybe it's not on anymore, but William Shatner. And it was supposed to be, it presents itself as a show if you're skeptical about these investigative or these claims of these supernatural things. And it's fucking garbage. It's the shittiest. I've watched I think the first season of it, and it pretends to be skeptical when in fact it just shits on skepticism and sort of implies that any amount of like going like, yeah, but that's not proof, is it? Is you just being a cynical asshole. And for all the reasons why I'm a cynical asshole, wanting proof is not one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this looks like our final one of the show. Hill Hugger to my previous super chat over the line. To get my previous super chat to over the line, I read it anyway. So sorry that you spent the extra $10. But I ended up reading it. That is it for us tonight. That Seth, this was great. It's been a while since I think the last time we did something together. I think I was on your podcast, but we did do a call-in show once before also. I just don't remember the timing of... Time has become meaningless since the pandemic, but I hope that we don't wait so long to do something like this again because I had an absolute blast, and I hope it was at least moderately okay for you. Would you tell people
it's a real pleasure.
Thank you. Would you tell people where to find you and everything?
Thank you. Thanks for humoring me and listening and all that.
Yeah.
My work is easy to find. I'm host of a site called The Thinking Atheist. I am not the Thinking Atheist. That is an icon which represents reason over faith. The website is thethinkingatheist.com. My personal website, sethandrews.com. And now my second podcast is truestoriespodcast.com. So those are the three main hubs to find me.
I'll be checking those out tonight. All right. Thank you, everybody. We will see you back tomorrow for the Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty. He has David Tamayo on. Then this Thursday, the Transatlantic Call-In Show is Katy and Dr. Ben will be back for that. And then myself and Dillahunty will return this coming Saturday for the Sunday show. And then we'll start a whole new week of amazing shows. Oh, actually, one last. Don't miss the premiere of Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock on this very channel starting next Tuesday, and then it will be every Tuesday from then on, a call-in show with an atheist, a skeptic, and a person with ALS who will pass away in the coming years. But before he does, you will get to benefit from his wisdom, and if you like, you can call in and speak to a non-believer who is facing his own mortality. That's it for us tonight. Now, Seth and I are going to pretend our mics go mute as the credits play, but in fact, they're still going to be open. So it's going to be all acting. We'll see how I like throwing this on everybody right at the end. We'll see what Seth's mind works like. Oh, and the wrong thing goes up.